And we're back to the Constitution line by line. We were just having a conversation about Android versus iPhone. And anyhow.
And it has nothing to do with the Constitution.
Well, it sort of did. Anyhow, we've been going through the Constitution line by line. We are now into the amendments, deep into the amendments.
Deep.
Today, we're talking about the 16th Amendment.
That's right. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
And I'm Don Frazier. I teach history. He teaches political science. And now we're going to learn something about taxes.
Income taxes. Here we go, folks. Ready? The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration.
Pretty simple. Congress now has the ability to tax any income. And we've now divorced ourselves from any sort of enumeration or census. I mean, it's just however we want to do it, we can do it.
Right. And supposedly there was an idea when the amendment was first proposed that it be limited to a certain percent, like 1% of your income.
Then perhaps they should have mentioned that.
They decided not to do that. And now the top rate is what, 37%?
Yeah, correct.
So quite a change over time. If only they had put in that 1%, might be a whole different kind of government, whole different kind of tax structure. Might be different in a lot of different ways.
Might have been. I mean,
so
all of a sudden you couldn't have funded the massive expansion of the U.S. government that's occurred in the 20th century.
Exactly.
There's just no way you could have done it.
Yeah.
So the fact that the federal government can expand, fueled by the income of its citizens and their economic activities, means that they're going to push every other baby bird out of the nest.
That's an interesting way to put it.
I'm just saying, this is like cuckoos have laid their eggs in your nest, man.
Yes.
And anyhow, your offspring sooner or later are going to be irrelevant.
Right. Now, my favorite part of this amendment is where it says, whatever source derived. It didn't say legal sources.
Any source.
Any source. So wherever you get your money from, you got to pay income tax on it.
That's right. Even if you're a rum runner during Prohibition.
And you think about Al Capone as an example of that.
He goes down for tax evasion.
Yeah, yeah. So this was an interesting way to go about this task that they set up for us. So,
well, and tax evasion charges are a very useful tool for breaking up crime syndicates.
Oh, very, very much. Did you report your income?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Well, then we're not going to get you for the people that you made disappear with cement shoes, but we will get you for not paying your taxes.
Pay your taxes, folks. Pay your taxes. And, of course, that creates a dilemma then for people who are engaged in illegal activities because that means they've got to report their illegal income, which creates some uncomfortableness on their part.
Well, it creates money laundering.
Yeah. Yeah. So, did this income actually create more crime? I mean, this income tax create more crime?
Well, it created a lot more, a lot broader spectrum of crime.
Right.
It may have invented new crimes.
Right.
So, when was this passed?
This was passed, 1913, and it was proposed in 1909.
So what was going on in these people's minds that they thought that what we need is an income tax?
Well, it's actually an old idea.
Oh, absolutely. You see the Internal Revenue Service coming in with direct taxes during the course of the Civil War, for instance.
Right. Before that, the government was very small, and it was funded by lotteries and fees, excise fees, income, import fees, that sort of thing. Civil War came along. We had an income tax. That disappeared after the Civil War. But that really got the conversation going, as I understand.
Sure.
And people said, there's a lot of money to be had if we, in fact, tax income. And so there was a gradual conversation that the American people had and our elected representatives had that we need to move towards an income tax. And at that time, remember, this is the beginning of the temperance movement. You could not turn to the old method of lotteries.
Because that's gambling.
That's gambling, and you
Yeah.
couldn't do that. So how do you collect taxes from people? How does the government fund itself? And so gradually, and some states are already doing it, you start taxing your income. And there was enough support for it by the time that this was proposed that everybody said, yeah, this is a good idea.
Well,
And
I would
I'd like
also
to go back to them and knock them in the head.
Well, you can, and here's
I
how.
can?
You can. You can
can go
actually
back in time?
travel. Because this is also the beginning of the progressive era.
Yes.
And so you had a lot of political theory going on in the early 1900s that, there's probably a natural elite within the country.
Okay.
I'm telling you. The populists in the late 19th century were kind of a bottom up. We're going to go in there and we're going to fix things. It's going to be the will of the people. And you see a lot of populist legislation passed, especially in the West, and it kind of bleeds north. That's where the farmers and the machinists are all getting together, and they all have common cause against the man.
Yeah.
All right, so finally that raises enough dust that the populist platforms get incorporated into the national mainstream platforms. And then this idea of scientific progressivism, that essentially everything is going in a particular direction and it is constantly improving.
Right.
But
Progress,
that's
progress.
and that's why it's progressivism. But this is also hard on the heels of things like scientific ideas of efficiency and also things like natural selection.
I was going to say, because
Darwinism is kicking around.
Darwinism is kicking around, but then the evil side of that too, eugenics,
Is kicking around at the
is
exact
also
same time
going
period.
on around this too.
So you have this idea that mankind is perfectible and that there's probably a natural aristocracy of very smart, very well educated, and very well intentioned people that can kind of fix all of society's ills. The things that the populists couldn't quite get all the way done, now they could do it. One historian described progressivism as populism that's moved to town and put on a clean shirt. And so now we have these people
Took a
saying,
bath.
"Yeah, took a bath. We know what's good for you.
Exactly.
We know what's
we need
good
to
for
make
you.
that point.
And since we're all smarter and better educated than you, you just kind of need to hook up and shuffle along with us. Trust us. We know what's right." And I think that this legislation is symptomatic of the thinking of the time period.
Right. In other words, if we're going to have this group of people, or this idea that there's a group of people and they have these ideas, well, it needs to be funded.
It has to be funded
And-
because you're going to have regulations.
Yes.
And you're going to have people in charge to think lofty thoughts about how things should be.
Right. So they need to have the money to put in play their ideas.
Correct.
So government needs a regular source of money. And that's really what they got here.
That's exactly what they got here.
Yeah.
And that, we talk about how the fundamental nature of the United States changes after the Civil War with the Civil War amendments, the Reconstruction amendments. I would say it makes another fundamental shift right about now in the early 20th century with the rise of the progressive era, and the American century, the 20th century, is fueled in part by skimming your paycheck.
And by the way, there's more coming in the subsequent amendments, because we're going to have 3 amendments in the span of 6 years.
Yes, correct.
So,
Well, we got to tweak the machine a bit to where
Right.
we can continue to do what's in your best interest.
and by the way, this occurs around World War I.
Correct?
And of course, then the great influenza of 1819 also takes place at the end of that.
I mean, 1990.
1919.
Yeah.
So what we've got is we've got a society that there's some tumult going on.
And there's also some pretty draconian measures going on. I mean, you brought up World War I. The whole idea behind the U.S. entry into World War I was this was going to be the war to end all wars.
Right.
So that tells you something about the arrogance of progressivism at that time, that, hey, we have finally applied science to the point to where we can make the world safe from war. we can eliminate one of the plagues that has dogged humanity forever.
Right.
And
Now,
that's just part of it.
right now, we got to say, in fairness, one of the big things that they were concerned about was something like food safety.
Oh, well, sure.
Yeah,
Not everything with progressivism was bad.
Yeah,
You don't want to
that's
eat rat hair in your hamburger meat.
So,
Yeah.
at the same time this was going on, government was taking more of an involvement in private industry, and especially food safety. And you think of Upton Sinclair as an example.
And
of
drug safety. I mean, we're
Yeah.
starting to talk about snake oil salesmen being something of,
Yeah.
of a relic.
So regulation was good in some cases. It was absolutely needed. And if you're going to do that, you've got to fund the government. So you need a regular source of income. And the income tax provided that.
Correct.
So
There
but
you go. If
they
you don't
should
like,
have put that 1% in
yeah,
there.
they put no brakes on it
They
at
put
all.
no caps. No.
So this thing could just churn right along.
Yeah. Who knows what it'll be.
But it's an arrogant age, I would argue, as well.
Oh, I won't disagree. I won't disagree at all.
And there's a certain amount of arrogance within that progressive movement that kind of filters on, I would argue, all the way to the present day. But that's just me.
That's just him.
That's just him.
All right. By the way, that arrogance and everything really came to a shocking end with the Great Depression.
Yeah, well, yeah, there is, in fact, natural limits to
Yeah.
how smart you think you are.
Exactly. And so, but right now we're in 1913 with this.
And
then-
everything's fresh and young, and the horizon is limitless.
And the next amendment we're going to talk about also was ratified in 1913.
Great. We'll talk
Your
about
favorite amendment.
Yeah, the one that I just despise. All right. So we'll talk about the 17th Amendment next time.